Hi there, welcome to the Upcycle Design Lab. If this is your first time here, my name's Cindy and I craft using recycled and repurposed materials to give you ideas on ways to make and create more economically and ecologically. And today I'm going to be using some of my homemade beads that I've made from aluminum beer and soda cans to make some fun memory wire bracelets. So here are a couple of bracelets that I've already made from the aluminum can beads. And you can see that this one just has the aluminum color showing. And on this one, I went ahead and colored the beads with some alcohol ink. Before we get started, I did want to briefly touch on all of the different bead shapes that I have made. If you go to the bead rolling tutorial that will be linked in the description box, you'll find links to all of these templates. And you can either cut the beads by hand or on a Cricut cutting machine. I have SVG files available and also PDF files available. So once you have your aluminum sheet flattened, you can make any of these beads. I will also link to a tutorial on several different ways to flatten the aluminum into the sheets, and also how I break down my cans if you're interested in those resources as well. So my first bead was just this oblong bead, and it comes with a template that you can see all of them are sized to fit the aluminum sheet. This next template is what I call the cylinder beads, and if you roll just one of the strips, you'll get a smaller bead. This variation is 2 strips put together. You get a sort of more of a disc size. And the bead roller that I have, you can roll up to 3 strips of material. That's the biggest, widest bead you can make. So you could do yet another one if you wanted to. This next bead is my large oval bead, and it has a template that comes in 3 different sections. So if you put all 3 sections together, you get this large oval bead. If you roll just the largest 2 sections, you get sort of a more flattened oval bead. If you roll the 2 smaller sections, you get a smaller oval bead. And if you just roll the smallest piece, you get kind of a more round shaped bead. So those are all of the rolled beads that I have made so far, and like I said, you can find all the templates linked in the video tutorial for the rolled beads. The other bead that I've made is what I call a pillow bead, and I actually made this one in the shape of a charm, but it has a totally separate tutorial for it. And you can find that linked in the description box as well. I'm planning to make several bracelets today, so I've got several beads made for each set. And I tried to make enough beads so that I could make a bracelet similar to this one, which is just 3 wraps around. So before we make the bracelets, we need to go ahead and cut the memory wire. I just bought this on Amazon. I don't remember exactly how much it was, but it's fairly inexpensive. It is a little trickier to work with than regular jewelry wire because it does want to coil back and it can get a little bit tangled if you're not careful. You don't have to do this, of course, but I think the general rule is that you want your ends to be kind of across from each other. It's okay if they're a little past each other. I think it looks better than if they're a little more open, but it's certainly up to you how you want to do it. So the other thing about it is that once it has beads on it, it won't coil quite as tightly. So to measure, you really want to kind of have it wrapped around your wrist. And this is a piece that I've already cut, and you'll notice that my ends do not line up at all. And that's because I want to allow for it to expand a little bit. And I also need some excess to make my coils to hold the beads on both ends. So when I have this wrapped around my wrist, you can see that I have 3 distinct bands. And if I'm calculating how this is going to fit, I like to leave about 1 inch to coil up. And then if you take 1 inch off of here as well, that gives you a little bit of excess to play around with, and you can cut it off at the end. And some people are probably more exact about how they cut their memory wire, but I like to give myself a little bit of leeway because it's easier just to cut off a little bit of excess once you have all the beads on your bracelet. This wire is harder to cut than most jewelry wires, so I have some nail pulling pliers here, and they work really well just to cut this wire. To start the first end, you're going to need your round-tipped jewelry pliers, and I'm just going to make about 3 rings around the middle to the large end of my round-tipped jewelry pliers. And you want to bend your wire with the direction of the coil so that you're not fighting against the curve that's already there. So once you've got 2 or 3 coils, you can go ahead and start stringing the beads on. And I have my beads kind of set up here, ready to go. So I'm just going to start stringing them in sort of a random pattern. The one thing you want to kind of make sure of is that your larger accent beads aren't right directly across from each other on each of the wires. So if you end up with some that are that way, you can restring them, take them off, and space them out differently. I honestly haven't found a really great way to hold on to these rings to make everything slide on nice and easily. And you might still have some tangles, but obviously the more coils you have, the harder the wire is going to be to work with. I have found that if you think about it too much, it just slows you way down. So just kind of loop them on in a random pattern, and if you do something and you really don't like it, you can take it off and start over. But here's what I'm talking about. Now, you might not want those 2 white beads right together, and you definitely don't want a bunch of these stacked right on top of each other. It's easier once you get a few beads on there, but it still wants to tangle up. All right, I'm getting close to having made it all the way to the end here. But like I said, I like to have them overlap a little bit more than a little bit less. And I also like to finish with the bead that I started with. So I'm going to put 1 or 2 more small beads on here, and then I'll slide my last gray oblong bead on. And then I'm going to hold everything tight and just try it on to make sure that I like the way everything's lining up. And you can see that even though it looked like it was going to be way too big, it's barely lining up. So I'm going to actually take this off and add a couple more beads. Or 1 more, I guess. I'll just add 1 more of these white beads. Try it again. So that's a little bit better. When the coil's made, it's going to definitely kind of overlap a little bit, but you can certainly make them any length you want to. So holding my beads tight, I want to leave about 1 inch of length to coil up. So I'm just going to eyeball about 1 inch and then use my nail pulling pliers to cut the wire again. And then I'm just going to use my round tip jewelry pliers to coil up the opposite end here to tighten the beads on. And you can see that these rings aren't coming straight out of the beads. So I am going to actually take my jewelry pliers and bend against the coil of the wire just to straighten my rings out so that they will be centered over the bead instead of hanging kind of off to the side. You can just leave the rings on the end if you want to, or if you can add some little charms. I happen to have a couple of beads left over and some large jump rings. So I'm just going to string the beads onto my jump ring and add them to the ends of my bracelet for a little charm. Got my bead on the jump ring, and I'll just string it through and use my needle nose pliers to close the jump ring. So that's how you can make a memory wire bracelet using aluminum can beads. If you enjoyed today's project, please hit the like button to help promote this channel. If you haven't already, I'd love to have you join my YouTube family by clicking that subscribe button. Be sure to check the description for all the additional resources or to sign up for my email newsletter. You can also click one of the videos below to learn how I made the aluminum can beads for this project. Thanks so much for watching. I hope to see you back here soon in the lab for my next experiment.